everyone, this video is about the builder design pattern. So the intention of the builder design pattern is to separate the steps used to construct an object from the representation of that object so that the same construction process could be used to create different representations. Now, let's I think the best way to actually understand what this is talking about is to use an example. And what I've done is I've sort of written out the example that's in the text, but I'm using a more modern context so that it's easier for you to understand what it's actually trying to say. So in the book, they have this example with an RTF builder and sorry, RTF reader. And for those of you who don't know what RTF is called Rich Text Format. That's what it stands for. It's a format that I think exists in like there's an app called WordPad. I don't know if it's still even around. It's a Windows thing. Okay, so if you've never heard of it, don't worry about it. It was kind of a crappy format. I've made a change to it, but I'm still sort of doing the same thing. So let's suppose that I have a markdown file. Now this file here, this is a markdown file. So markdown file is used a lot these days for formatting it started off as like formatting wikis, but it's actually something that you can use to format pages on GitHub and things like that. So Markdown is very popular. It's a simplified version of HTML that has less available tags, but it also provides enough to keep everything neat because you can't do everything in it. It's kind of nice that way. In any case, this is Markdown. Now in Markdown, this means header level one pound sign is header level one, 2 pound signs is header level two, and then this is just plain text right here. Okay, so that's all the Markdown we're going to ever process. Obviously, it's incomplete, but you can imagine sort of building out something that's more complete just by adding extra tags and so on. Okay, so let's take a look at an application of what we want to do with this. So let's say that I have a markdown file, and what I want to do is I want to either represent that as a text file or an HTML file. So obviously two very fairly different things. So an HTML file not only will contain all the text that is in my markdown file, but it would actually have to build HTML tags. So you have your HTML, then you have your header, then you have your body tags, right? Sorry, head tag and body tag and so on, right? And then not only that, but you would also have to surround like builder with h1 and slash h1, and same thing with intention. It would be header level 2, right? So you would have to add these tags inside HTML to actually make it be HTML. Whereas a text file, I would probably just say, oh, this says builder, put the word builder in, that's it. Intention, put the word intention in, that's it. And then the rest of it is just words. So I'm going to just add them in as needed, okay? So let's take a look at how we might actually write this application, okay? So first of all, my program starts up and I give the user a choice. So exactly what are you trying to convert your markdown file to? Are you trying to store it as a plain text file, or are you trying to do HTML? So let the user make that choice. And then you find out what the name of the file is. And then what you do is you have this markdown parser. So this is basically what is called the director of the for the builder pattern. So if you took a look at the textbook, they have this they have like the general pattern says that there's a director, and then the director knows about this builder object that then builds it out. So what we have here is we have this markdown file, markdown parser. This is our director. And what it's going to do is it's going to read our markdown file. And as it reads the markdown file, it will build either a text or an HTML object. And what it builds depends on whether the user chose HTML or text. And the only thing that we do different is we configure it with a different converter. So if we're going from Markdown to plain text, we use a plain text converter. If it's Markdown to HTML, we use an HTML converter. And we basically knew these on construction. So we create these converters when we initialize our parser. And this, depending on which one I configure my parser with, it will do different things. Okay, so right here, I've made the decision on which one to use, and then when we actually go to build it, it will know how to do it. So let's take a quick look at the things that we will build. So one representation of the markdown file is as a plain text file where I have a string. And so think of it as all of the text, just the words, nothing else. And so what happens is if I get some sort of token, a token is really things that are separated by spaces. Every time I see a token, if it's not the very first token, I'm going to put a space in between to separate out the words, and that's pretty much it. Okay. And at the end, if I want to know what is going into the text file, I simply return S, and that's all of the text that's in the file. I have an HTML file, which sort of is the same idea, except that because it's an HTML text, like it represents the contents of an HTML file, I have to start the string off with like the HTML tag and the head tag and so on. So I'm starting it off with HTML and then dot, dot, dot for everything else. And then I start putting things in. So I would start going through, and when I have a token, I don't always put a space in. It depends if it's a head tag or not. So if my token is a head tag, I'm not going to put a space in front. Okay, even if it's not the first string. So if it's a head tag, I won't bother. I won't bother with it. So this is sort of how an HTML file would append tokens. So it depends a little bit on exactly how this works. So let's take a look at how we would then this would work. So when we created this, we said, okay, you can either choose a plain text converter or you can choose an HTML converter. So in the Markdown parser on construction, I configured the parser with a builder. So it will either build HTML objects or it will build text objects. And then I then say, okay, open the file and pass that file into the director and have it go over the file and build out each of the different types of files I can get. So if so this is what it's going to do. So for every single token that's in this MD file, and obviously this doesn't work, okay, but if I were to have a way to sort of like break it down into separate little pieces, then every time I see a pound, I'm going to call build header 1. Every time I see 2 pound signs, I'm going to call build header 2. And if I see a new line, it means that I might have to put in an end token. So I'm going to call the end token function. And then otherwise, I will just call like a regular text token function. Okay, so how would this work? And so now it doesn't matter if the file doesn't support pound or pound pound. It doesn't actually matter for this. It doesn't matter if it doesn't support headers or anything like that. So what happens with the builder is we have sort of like this base converter class. And what I do in this converter class is I actually just have these pure, sorry, not pure, just virtual functions that are empty. So notice these are not pure, they are empty. It means that there is actually a way to do all of this. It just does absolutely nothing. So what does build header 1 do? Does nothing. It will do nothing, and that's the end of it. And build header 2 is the same thing, and same is build text and token. So every single function has no implementation in the base class. If the derived class actually does something, it's going to override the base. So it's going to replace what's in the base class, okay? And so what happens here is that for something like plain text converter, what it will do is it will say, okay, I don't actually have header 1, so I'm just going to ignore those, so I don't bother. It's just an empty function to me. Same with header 2, same with end tokens. I'm not going to do any of it. I only have build text. And when I have build text, what do? I take the token and I append it according to how this thing works. So appending is just this code right here. Now, what about an HTML converter? What will it do instead? So this part of it is wrong. This should be HTML, sorry. So the HTML converter will create an HTML file object, and then it sets up header as 0. So header 0 means it's not trying to deal with a header right now because it hasn't read the first token yet. And if it's a regular token, it just takes the token, appends it according to the HTML converter, sorry, HTML file. So the append function, like this one, whether it might or might not add a space depending on what the token is. And but if it's a header 2, it will append a header 1, it will append a header 1 text tag. And if it's header 2, it will append a header 2 tag. So that's what these functions do to put the headers in. Now, it also indicates that, hey, a header has been added, okay? So what happens is that when when the parser hits the new line, it will call the end token function, and depending on what type of whether or not a header had been encountered, it will put in the ending token at that point. So that's how this will work. Okay, and if I call the get HTML function, it will return the entire string representing the HTML file. So here, what I'm doing is I'm actually using this same parser, here, this construction process. It's the same regardless of whether I'm trying to build a text file or if I'm trying to build an HTML file. They actually work the same way from the construct point of view. And if I wanted to build some other weird format like PDF, if I have the code to like what I need to build a PDF, I can actually use the same process in that PDF build or whatever other format that you want, XML, pick your poison, right? So you can do this with any sort of you can use the same process to build out different types of objects uh, by using this builder pattern. That's the purpose of the builder pattern. Okay, that's all I really want to say about builder. Uh, Thank you.